All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics and Money. Excited to be with you once again. Uh, Something major that just announced by none other than Donald Trump. And this one has to do with regime change. I thought he wasn't interested in that. Didn't he say that a few days ago?
Yes, we have been getting the rhetoric pretty much that there is absolutely no regime change. That's not what they're interested in. It's only this nuclear weapon thing, and that's it. That's it. Well, now the nuclear facilities have been bombed
Mm-hmm.
and are non-functional. There's a lot of very other interesting sort of moving parts to that
Yeah.
because according to some of the top people that are sort of analyzing this, and David, I would really love for you to weigh on this also,
Yeah.
is whatever Iran was actually doing, they just moved it and now people don't know where it is. So Scott Ritter said that, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago. And so right now, if all of the nuclear stuff is more or less taken care of with the amazing bombs that the US
Yeah.
dropped, according to Donald Trump, why is there now talk of regime change?
Change. Very interesting question. Well, first of all, the nuclear material has been moved, at least based on the research that I did, the readings that I did, and the some people that I talked to. So it has been moved, and Iran already considered the possibility of targeting the nuclear facilities, so the nuclear power plants facilities. That's why they went ahead and moved the material out. Second thing, for Trump to say it's successful, it's just a lie. There is just a lie. This a whole bombing. When you think about what they bombed the entrance of a nuclear facility. Okay,
Yeah.
how sort of did they achieve any objective? I don't think so. I don't think so. It's only now it's going to sort of expedite the process for Iranians to say to themselves, you know what? Let's move forward. What's surprising to this is the statements about regime change. Nobody's
Sorry, I have to interject because we have to do an ad spot from
sure.
our sponsor, Giant Mining. They sponsored all the shows that we have this week. So big thank you to them because without our sponsors, this show wouldn't be possible. So let's go to the ad spot and we will be right back afterwards.
Oh, a big thank you to today's show sponsor, Giant Mining Corp. Without our sponsors, this show wouldn't be possible. Copper shortages just went political. Washington's eyeing import tariffs, and the scramble for homegrown supply is on. Prices are brushing $4.85 a pound, while global stockpiles sit at a 15-year lows. Enter Giant Mining Corp, advancing the 9,800-acre Majuba Hill project in mining Red, Nevada. Recent drilling caught a 170-foot zone averaging 0.4% copper, crowned by a 10-foot streak at 4.4% grades that the majors pay billions for. Independent engineers at RASPC are already modeling the first resource estimates. So Majuba moves while rivals wrestle with the new red tape. Speed wins the super cycle, and they are built for speed. Dig deeper at giantminingcorp.com or on the OTC at BFGFF in the US and BFG in Canada. Remember, there are always risks in investments and there are no guarantees of any kind. Always do your own research.
All
All right.
right.
Thank you for that. So very, very interesting that now the word regime change start to circulate. Well, to me, it's kind of like easier said than done. So we all know how Trump operates, but on the other hand, the Ali Khamenei in Iran, they have some sort of strategy in place They have dealt with this before, and I wrote about it in my book, in my Iran book.
All right. Let's okay. So first of all, part of what we're talking about is coming from this lovely Truth social post. Do you want to read it, David? Do you want me to read it?
No, you go ahead. You go ahead,
Okay.
please.
So as you know, we now get our information from the White House through Truth Social, through Donald Trump's posts on Truth Social. It's not politically correct to use the term regime change. Well, I mean, I don't know that bombing people overall is like a politically correct thing. I'm kind of shocked by the use of like, oh, it's politically correct. But if the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again, why would there be a regime change? MIGA, make Iran great again. That is a very odd post.
It is very, in a sense that, first of all, if you are regime change, that has to come from the Iranians themselves. It's the people. It's like, who are we to tell? It's like some other country will tell us, hey, guys, you got the wrong president. You need to have a regime change in America. Well, guess what? They will be right, because we got an idiot in the White House.
Right.
I'm not holding back because it's the truth. We don't have any leaders whatsoever, but you don't hear other countries saying this about us. Well, what gives us the right to say this? Second thing is, it's easier said than done. If you want this kind of regime change in a country like Iran, you're going to have troops on the ground. Iran is not Syria. Iran is not Libya. Iran is not Iraq or Somalia, for that matter. So, and this is why what it says versus what it is are two separate worlds, if I may say. And I don't know what Mr. Trump is operating on. But here is the thing, Elizabeth, if I may quickly here.
Yes.
What coincided with this, and we're going to share this with the community because I came across it this morning. And to me, it was kind of surprising. And here it is. I'm going to share it quickly on the screen.
I think you shared the post.
Not that one. No, hold on a second.
Okay. While you're doing that, David, would you like me to read the excerpt from your book?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you. Let's get that on the stage. So David is an absolute subject matter expert in this area. You wrote a book on it. I know a couple of people have been asking you to write even more about it because you fundamentally know so much about it. So this is an excerpt from that book. So it says, despite the Bush administration's application of unilateral and multilateral sanctions on Iran, so interesting. Let's talk about sanctions in a minute. Multilateral sanctions on Iran to halt the enrichment of uranium. Those efforts failed in their objective of completely halting Iran's nuclear program. I argue that Iran understood that the U.S. was stuck in Iraq, given that the invasion turned out to be a disastrous venture for the United States' effort to spread democracy.
Of course.
Thus, Iran did not take seriously the U.S.'s threatening language of regime change. The other factor was that Iran was convinced that the Bush administration was unlikely to engage in another military conflict in the Middle East, given the American public's opinion about the wars in both Iraq and Afghanistan, which saw massive losses in blood and treasure.
Well, that's exactly how I see it. And this is why now when you hear this conversation about regime change, as I said, it coincided with a speech by none other than the son of the former, and I'm trying to get to the stop screen here. Okay. I'm trying to get share screen. All right. I'm trying to get to the the statement by the son of Iran's leader right here. So let's take a listen quickly here, guys.
Step down, and if you do, you will receive a fair trial and due process of law, which is more than you have ever given any Iranian. To other senior regime officials, those of you whose hands are soiled with the blood of the Iranian people, you too will have to face justice. But we will not repeat the mistakes in other failed transitions. To those of you who are loyal to the Iranian nation and not the Islamic Republic, there is a future for you in a democratic Iran. If you join the people now, the choice is yours to make.
All right. So, and by the way, I give credit to Giuliano. He's the one who posted this on my Twitter account. So I had a chance to read it through there. So Angelo Giuliano, that's the ones for those who do not know. So anyway, the idea now. Now here is one thing that a lot of people might not know. The agency, our three-letter agency, has been working with the son of the Shah for a while. He's been living in San Diego. I was familiar with it for the last literally 15, 20 years. I know he lives in San Diego. There is a large Iranian community in San Diego. And this is why, if you noticed, where were the first demonstrations in the US against the attack on Iran? It was in San Diego. See what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
That's exactly how it is. So the idea of this regime change, while it's easier said than done, it's not going to work that way, because there are a lot of complications regarding something of this magnitude.
So I think that's that really begs a big question, and that is, why does the US want regime change in general? So I have, you brought up sanctions in your in the part of the book that I read. Guys, if you're just joining us, David wrote a book on Iran. So he is very much a subject matter expert in this way. So I'm very curious overall. I think the big question is, pretty much every president has been talking about Iran for, I don't know, as long as I've been alive, as long as I can remember. You have Nixon freaking talking about it. I've seen it's been so funny. The internet has pulled up all of these articles about Iran is 5 months from having nuclear bombs in 1995. So I mean, this has been This has been absolutely talked about for decades, for most, if not the entire. Actually, I think probably the entirety of my life. Right?
Actually, it was for 3 decades since the Israelis start talking about it.
Yeah,
literally,
this is absolutely insane. And then, and we have now Tulsi Gabbard talking backwards. Oh no, I didn't say, I didn't really mean that, whatever. But I mean, if Iran has been on the cusp of having nuclear weapons for 30 years, I mean, either they're just awful and have the worst scientists in the entire world, or they have it secretly and just didn't tell anybody, hid it pretty well. Or they just are not interested in having it. Okay, so those are our 3 options in this regard. So the real question is, why right now? Is it that this particular regime is doing something that Israel and the United States don't like? Is it that sanctions failed with Iran? I think that Iran is an interesting case study, actually, in sanctions failing. Russia is another case study in sanctions failing. And so, when Iran was sanctioned by the United States, what did they go do? They went and found other economic partners. So Iran sells the bulk of its oil to China, for example, and then it kind of gets shipped all over the world, and it ends up actually being sold to the United States through proxies. Which is, it's also interesting that uranium from Russia was still being purchased by the United States during the whole Ukraine conflict, as the Ukraine conflict has progressed. And so sanctions fundamentally have not worked. And so do you think that's a part of why this is happening right now? Why is it happening right now? And I know that the Trump administration kept saying, oh, it's not about regime change. It's not about regime change. It's not about regime change. And whenever a government says it's not about something,
that's exactly what it's about.
That's exactly what it's about.
That's true. That is true.
what really is the background? What is the regime change about?
Yeah.
Why right now, when this rhetoric has been going on for as long as I've been alive?
What they are realizing that now this bombing that Donald Trump embarked on, it just, first of all, it's going to backfire. Second, it's going to become his own war. That's how he's going to be now defined forever. You know, his legacy is going to be, oh, he's the one who started the major war in the Middle East. I mean, you think about Bush, what comes to mind right away? The chaos he created in Iraq and the Middle East at large. So, but the idea of the regime change that's now floating out there, here is what, and some of us Americans don't have some sort of a great understanding of the history. If you think about the regime change, we've already tried and tested that before, and it failed. And I want to remind you all of the 2009. You all remember the Green Movement, which was quickly put down and out. That was exactly who was supporting that. It was the U.S. And it was, as I argued in my book about that one, I remember writing about it somewhere, something to the effect that the regime change in itself, which was sort of at that time pushed by the so-called civilians, will have no impact unless elements, here is the key, unless elements inside the Iranian military establishment backs it up. It's because you have to understand the structure of the Iranian government and how it is, and why the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, why it's so strong militarily and has a firm grip on certain sectors of society. So, and this is unlikely to happen. It's because given that most, if not all, government sectors, including the military, are under the control of this establishment. This is why, to me, I always thought about it, and I argued this back then, and I said, be careful what you embark on. And I wrote back then that there is a danger that lies ahead that I saw back then with this kind of scenario of to those who advocate for regime change. Because assuming some foreign entities fully supported might have underestimated how the Iranian regime, which could be armed with some type of conventional weapons, that includes nuclear aspects of it, might react to that change. Because that's how it is. The case of Iran is different than Syria. It's different. And this is why, guys, we need you to understand the big picture. This is why we went after weakening Iraq. We went after weakening Syria. We went after and still trying to weaken Lebanon. And we already saw what we did in Yemen. All this, it's not in a vacuum. There is a reason for that. There is a reason for that. But for Iran in itself is a different ball game. So when Donald Trump just threw in the word regime change right now, of course, the reason for all that also is because Israel now is realizing it is in much worse situation than it was before.
Yeah, can you actually speak to that a little bit more? The position more or less that Israel is in, because right now Israel has sort of been, they're not really the talking points anymore. The talking points is the US entering this conflict. Yeah. But let's say the US did this, and then I want to talk about this, and I want to get your opinion on this in a minute. But what actually is the position that Israel is in right now? Well, in as much as you can say on YouTube without getting our channel,
of course,
the air,
or even the sensitive aspects of it, because there are still some aspects of the law that I have to adhere to. Anyway, the idea that Israel now is realizing, I'm sure they did, but again, we have to remember the structure inside Israel government is chaotic. Not everybody on the same sheet of music, as we say. You know, there's a lot of tensions that exist within the Israeli government. So, but basically where the issue is, as I mentioned earlier, we all remember how long has Netanyahu been talking about, Iran is only 5 months closer to acquiring the bomb.
Absolutely.
That's been forever. Go back to 1986, one of his statements back in 1986. So my point is that at least what Israel was aware of is that Iran's nuclear program was at least limited to whatever it was doing. Okay? That means it wasn't containment of sort, because we couldn't contain Iran. If we would have succeeded in bringing them down after 1979 when we imposed sanctions. However, at least to a degree, back then, Israel knew that Iran will not just go ahead and attack it. So at least they were okay with that. But now they changed the equation, and Israel's fault. Israel's going to now dig a hole for itself that is not going to come out of it. In other words, they're going to now be sleeping with one eye open. This is what it's going to be. And when you have now, because at this point, if this moves forward with the US even getting more aggressive, Iran will have no choice but to just let loose of every types of weapon it has. And basically, it's not going to be here in the US on our territory. It will be some assets of the US in the Middle East. But who's going to acquire the hard hit of all this is Israel. This is what the problem now that Israel is going to be facing. It's almost unleashed more trouble that they could handle by going and attacking Iran.
So it's interesting that you say that. So I was listening to an interview with Scott Ritter from, I think, yesterday. And he was basically talking about the fact that the United States, that Donald Trump made this huge big show, which there is quite a lot of evidence to support.
It is a show.
Saying as well that he made this huge big show, and we can even play a little bit of his triumphant address. But he made a huge big show basically over more or less nothing, that the United States bombed nuclear facilities that basically were empty, that had previously been bombed by Israel, and that more or less Iran knew that was going to happen. So there was nothing left in them salvageable if there was anything, at all, right? And so I'm interested in your take on this particular tweet. Or by this particular idea. So let me share this with you guys, because this would be a very interesting attempt at controlling the situation that Israel started. So, this person is suggesting that senior Israel officials assess that Iran will, in one way or another, coordinate its attack on the United States. Because as we know, Iran came out and said, okay, attacks on the United States are incoming in a few hours. Similar to how it acted following the assassination of
Soleimani. Qasem Soleimani. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I
no worries.
Probably butchered that.
No worries.
This is intended to avoid an unplanned escalation and out of hope to contain the incident. Perhaps in this context, come the reports suggesting the U.S. already knows the attack will take place within the next 48 hours. What do you think about that? Is it possible that the U.S. is actually working with Iran to de-escalate this situation now that Donald Trump looks like he had a win, like a big giant win? Yeah. Is this an attempt actually to de-escalate the situation with a strategic attack that was planned more or less by both sides?
Yeah. Well, first of all, for Israel to state that one, it's nothing but to drag the U.S. even further, deeper into the issue. Use history as your guide and go back to the USS Liberty attack. Does anybody you guys know in the community, you know what I'm referring to, right? Who attacked the USS Liberty? It was Israel. And their false flag from, it was the enemy that did. So that's how they pulled the US into the whole conflict. And this is no different. Israelis tends to do this one. And I used to have colleagues who will travel to Tel Aviv and they will tell me that the room was bugged by the Israeli Mossad. Those are Americans. You're talking about allies. It's just the nature of it. So the statement for Israel is only by to pull that in. Second thing, the U.S. knows full well that, because if Iran doesn't react, they're going to risk the wrath of their own people. And Ali Khamenei does not want that.
Yeah, absolutely.
To do one thing or another. But that does not mean that the U.S. does not coordinate behind the scenes through a third party.
Yeah.
And usually the U.S. goes through either two players. One is Oman, and second one is Turkey. But for Turkey, is wishy-washy both sides anyway. But for Oman is always the independent, the neutral. You don't hear much about Oman, and usually has always been the one that navigate those kind of negotiations. But for this one is slightly different, even though we know what Trump did was nothing but just for show, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on. If you are to do this, you could have carpet bombing, flatten everything, not drop a bomb at the entrance of a nuclear facility that the material has already been moved out weeks before.
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So what Mr. Trump didn't count on is that the changes of the geopolitical landscape, which could, and I say could, force now possibly, and I'm thinking outside the box here, Russia and China in coordination with Iran will decide to put a no-fly zone. What makes us think that there is not a possibility for that? And even to make it even sort of more intriguing is, what if North Korea enters the fray with this? Come and join Russia and China. Possibilities are there, because to those countries is now or never. Don't expect the Arab world to do anything whatsoever, because those are so weak, incompetent. That's going to be now left to the major players. Even the Europeans might not have much of a say into all this.
Yeah, and I think you're touching on something very important, and that is Russia and China's involvement with Iran, and to what extent they're actually going to step into this into this conflict. We basically have Russia, and we might touch on this a little bit more. We might touch on this a little bit more in another show, but I'm going to add this to the stage.
Yeah.
So we touched on this yesterday, and this is Dmitry Medvedev, and he is the deputy chair of Security Council of Russia and former president. So he goes basically through. He has a very long tweet set, but basically one of the things that he talks about now other nuclear countries, countries that have nuclear weapons actually want to give them to Iran. And so that is kind of a complete backfire. I mean, if it's sold, I mean, it's not going to be given, but if it's sold to them, that they don't have to have a nuclear program. They don't have to enrich uranium themselves. They can just buy it.
That's true.
And so I think that I don't know that that's Russia coming out and saying they're going to do it, but it's certainly not Russia condemning it.
Yeah.
It's certainly not China condemning that.
Yeah. Because Russia and China see the not the consequence, but rather the result of something like that, how it will alter the trajectory of the geopolitical landscape to their favor, because there will be it will be over, and Iran will not, and I repeat this, will not hesitate to use that against Israel. I'll tell you this flat out. As a matter of fact, I am going to be talking. Guys, I'm going to be talking about, I'm going to post it on the chat box for you. There's a link to my upcoming talk. I'm going to be talking about now a decision has been made inside Iran regarding the targeting of none other than the Dimona nuclear reactor. So, do you think that
David, is that happening right after this?
That's going to be at 12:15.
Perfect.
So the idea of when Russia stated that, because think about it, Saudis have a nuclear weapon in an escrow account. and we leave it at that, because I'm still under conditional not disclosing classified information. But they do. So what you stated, Elizabeth, as far as the Iranians purchasing that, it's a possibility.
Of course, it's
That
a
is
possibility.
It could.
And I'm kind of shocked that it's not a bigger conversation piece.
Well, they won't, because nobody will even think of it in those terms. And especially when you consider now the new nuclear devices are not this humongous one. They are now so small that you can put them in the trunk of your BMW and nobody will even know.
Yeah.
And that's you. But to Iranian regime, remember, they are pragmatic. They are not emotional. They don't react emotionally. They are very pragmatic, and they have to calculate their strategies. Otherwise, what makes you think, how did they survive since 1979? It wasn't because of the reactionary strategies and tactics, but rather for a very calculated strategies and this will be no different, except that now the game is in the open. And the Middle East that you and I know, or West Asia, that is, we used to be where the US was the main dominant player, is no longer.
Yeah.
And with that comes also the decline or the eradication of Israel as a major player inside the Middle East. Of course, that is the whole reason why this is happening, because we wanted to ensure that Israel stayed the only capable power in the region, so we can maintain dominance over it.
Well, and like I said, sanctions did not actually work.
No, it did not.
And I think that is a huge part of this. Is if you were going to control Iran went to China, Iran went to Russia, and those are its strategic partners right now. And so if the plan was, which it was at the time, to basically kill off Iran by sanctioning them, it fundamentally didn't work. And so, when you can't get what you want one way, maybe you get what you want another way. Yeah. So this is, what do you think the likelihood is that a regime change is actually going to happen, David?
It won't. It won't happen, in my opinion. It won't happen. Iran, the current regime, since the establishment of the revolution government, in other words, after 1979, one of the key structure they wanted to put into the government is to ensure that there will be no uprising internally. Now, we could try and all that, but it is very sort of, Israel, I'll give credit to Israel for this. You gotta give credit. They were able to penetrate through double agents and spies and so forth the Iranian system. So that means the Iranian government will have to ensure that their system, because remember, there are only a handful of people inside the government, from Ali Khamenei to the head of the IRGC, and only a handful of people who know the key strategic information, whatever that information is not disseminated to all sectors of the government. So, but regime change won't be that easy, in my opinion. That's going to require really massive presence on the ground from the foreign entity that is supporting that, basically from us and the Israelis. But what the Israelis have, those are just double agents, basically. It's the same thing that the Iranians have inside Israel. They are those double agents inside Israel spying on behalf of Israel, or on behalf of Iran. So the regime change, I don't see that happen, at least not now.
Well, I mean, Israel and the U.S. are trying real hard.
I know, because that's what we get used to doing. So let's say thank you quickly before we leave. And by the way, we want to say thank you to Kevin Baptist. We missed your super sticker yesterday. By the time we were logging off, we saw your.
No, it came right.
I know.
And stream.
Yeah. So Kevin, we want to say thank you so much for your super sticker yesterday. So we appreciate it. So for today, we're gonna do Chris right here. So Chris, we want to say thank you. And you wrote people dying because of Israel lies. Well, American lies as well. We lie. I mean, our government, it's pathetic, but that's the dirty side of politics. So, but now the world is changing, and we will be elaborating more on this. So Tomorrow, we're going to be having a great topic for you. We don't want to spoil it for you. We're going to keep it a surprise. But
it is related to BRICS, though. We will
Yeah.
give you that. It is related to BRICS.
and it's pertaining to all this, and we'll share that with you. So, all right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. You take care. Bye-bye.